A very good morning and welcome back once again to our session on this principles of cryptography and network security. In today's session, we are going to discuss about the various attacks that can happen on hash functions. So, as we have seen in the encryption algorithms, the attacks on the hash functions can be categorized into two categories, that is the brute force attack. We know what this brute force attack is. This is also called as the exhaustive search. That means we are going to try each and every possible combinations to get the desired result. That is the reason why we call it as the exhaustive search. And the second category of the attacks on these hash functions are the cryptanalysis. We have come across this particular terminology when we are discussing about the cryptographic algorithms. And the important difference between this brute force attack and the cryptanalysis is the brute force attack does not depend on algorithm. They does not depend on algorithm. Whatever cryptographic algorithm you take, the brute force attack can take place. But on what basis this brute force attack depends, or the how we are going to attack it by making use of this brute force, how easily we can attack is it depends on the bit length. So, the brute force attack is going to be depend upon the bit length. If it is the bit size is very large, then brute force attack is very much difficult. And if the bit size is very less, it is very easy to attack the things with this brute force attack. And another important point is it does not depend on the algorithm. Anywhere or any algorithm you can apply this brute force attack. And coming to the cryptanalysis is in the reverse order. That means it depends upon the algorithm. It depends on the cryptographic algorithm or the hash algorithms. That means it is going to find out the weaknesses of the cryptographic algorithms or cryptographic hash algorithms, and it is going to attack that particular weakness. These are the two major differences between these brute force attack and the cryptanalysis. This is very important topic. You should know the difference between the brute force attack as well as the cryptanalysis. Once we are clear about this brute force attack and the cryptanalysis, let us move into our actual topic of interest, that is how we are going to perform the brute force attack with respect to different resistance properties that we have seen earlier. So, the different resistance property that we have seen earlier are the pre-image resistant and second pre-image resistant, and finally we have seen the collision resistant. These are the three different resistance properties we have seen in the hash functions, the requirements of the hash functions. We will see how this brute force attack can happen on this pre-image and secondary pre-image resistant, and how this brute force attack happens in the collision resistant attack. Right. So, the first category what we are going to discuss is the pre-image and second pre-image attacks. We know the meaning of this pre-image attack, or the pre-image resistance means one-way property. Similarly, the second pre-image attack means it is nothing but the weak collision resistant. So, for a pre-image and second pre-image attack to happen, the adversary or the attacker, what he has to do is, as we know that the brute force attack is nothing but you have to try all the possible combinations. So, in this case, in order to have this pre-image and second pre-image attack, the attacker has to find the value of y such that h of y is equal to the given hash value h. That means the attacker is having a value of h, the hash value, and he wants to find this y such that h of y results in h. So, this is the input block we have, and this is the result we are expecting. We means the attacker is expecting. Since it is a brute force attack or it is a brute force method, the attacker has to select different random values of y. First he will start with y1, and then he will start with y2, and then he will start with y3. Like that he will try different possible combinations of y, and he applies this hash function on these different combinations. This particular application of the hash function on different wide variety of y values will continue until unless the attacker will get the final result, which is nothing but the h. So, once he gets the value of h, whatever value is present, that is, for example, assume that y3, on applying h hash function on y3, let us assume that we got the value of h. Therefore, the y3 is generated by applying this brute force attack. That means the pre-image is generated. The pre-image is nothing but the data block. So, the data block is generated. Right. So, applying this h on this y3, if it generates h, we say that there is a collision. Therefore, this y3 is the pre-image of the hash value h. Let us see what is the computational capability or computational effort we need to put on this particular attack, this pre-image or secondary pre-image attacks. Let us say that we have a m bit hash value, and the level of effort that the attacker has to put to generate this pre-image attack or the second pre-image attack is, he has to try all the combinations of 2 power m. That is, for example, if the hash value is a 64-bit hash value, in this case, the brute force attack or the brute force method for generating this pre-image and second pre-image attack will happen with 2 power 64 combinations. So, the attacker has to try all these 2 power 64 bit 2 power 64 combinations, which is highly impossible. But for present generation of computers and lot of computational capability that is available in today's scenario, it is almost possible, take it as granted. But 2 power 64 combinations of data you have to generate, and you have to apply the hash function on all those 2 power 64 combinations, and whenever you get that hash value h, then we say that collision has occurred and you are able to find the pre-image, which is not acceptable. So, this is one type of attack. So, this combination is very important. So, if you have a m bit hash value, the level of effort you should perform is the 2 power m. And once we are clear about this pre-image and second pre-image attacks, let us move our discussion with the second point, that is the collision resistant attacks. Remember that this collision resistant attack is being done by making use of the brute force method. So for a collision resistant attack, the attacker, what he has to do is he wants to find two messages of data blocks which are M1 and M2 that yield the same hash value, that is h of M1 is equal to h of M2. And remember that the collision resistant attack is considerably less effort than a pre-image or the second pre-image attack. Whatever attacks we have seen earlier, the pre-image and the second pre-image attacks, the efforts to get the pre-image and second pre-image attack to happen is considered to be 2 power m, right? And the collision resistant attack to happen with this brute force method, it comes around 2 power m by 2 if m is the m bits of hash value. So you can see here, for example, if you have a 64-bit hash value, then the number of combinations that the attacker has to try to get this collision resistant attack is 2 power 64 by 2, that is 2 power 32. Almost half of the efforts has been reduced. That is the reason why I am saying that the other is saying that the efforts that we put for getting this collision resistant attack to happen using this brute force method is less when compared to that of the efforts that we put for the pre-image or second pre-image attack to happen. And the effort that is required to get this collision resistant attack is explained by a concept called as the birthday paradox. The birthday paradox, which is not our point of interest. Therefore, we are not going to discuss about this birthday paradox. And this particular formula is very important. If we have a m bit hash value, the efforts that the attacker has to make to get this collision resistant attack to happen is 2 power m by 2. So if you compare all these three attacks or three resistant properties, the first one is the pre-image, the second one is second pre-image, and the third one is collision resistant attack. So the efforts is 2 power m for pre-image, 2 power m for second pre-image, and 2 power m by 2 for the collision resistant attack, where m stands for the number of bits of hash value. So that's all about this brute force attack. Let us move our discussion towards the concept of the crypt analysis. Crypt analysis. So let me take an example here. Right. So as I told that the crypt analysis is dependent on the algorithm whatever algorithm you take, the cryptanalysis efforts or the efficiency of the cryptanalysis vary from algorithm to algorithm. The main idea behind this cryptanalysis is we are going to consider the weaknesses of the algorithms that exist in the algorithm and we are going to attack it. So, before going to attack it, you should know the weaknesses of the algorithms. So, as with the other cryptographic encryption algorithms, what we have seen in the earlier sessions, like the symmetric block ciphers or symmetric stream ciphers, whatever it may be, the cryptanalytic attacks on hash functions, they want to exploit the properties of the algorithms to perform some attack. So, weakness of the algorithm is what you need to find before you perform this cryptanalysis. But this is not the case with the exhaustive search, which is nothing but the brute force method. That means the ideal hash algorithm will require a cryptanalytic effort that is greater than or equal to the brute force effort. So, if you want to compare this brute force attack with the cryptanalytic, the brute force attack or the cryptanalytic effort is greater than or equal to the brute force attack. This one. This is the relationship between the efforts for performing the brute force attack and the cryptanalytic attacks. So, in the recent years, there have been considerable effort and most of the scientists, they are being successful in developing the cryptanalytic attacks on the hash functions. Now, our topic of interest is to develop the cryptanalysis on the hash functions. So, they are already successful, some of the scientists, they are already successful. But you should understand one important structure that lies for this hash function, that is called as the iterated hash function. As we know that the hash function should be applied again and again in order to get a single output which is of fixed length, right. So, in order to have an idea of this particular hash function and how the cryptanalytic is going to happen on the hash function, we need to have a look at the overall structure of the typical secure hash function. So, this is the diagram that represents the typical secure hash function, and the name of this typical secure hash function is given as iterated hash function. So, this is hash function, this is nothing but a compression function. In the starting point of discussion about these cryptographic hash functions, I told that the basic function that we are going to use for the cryptographic hash functions is nothing but the compression function. This is f. So, f is treated as the compression function. So, coming back to our discussion again, this simple secure hash function is called as the iterated hash function, and it was developed by a scientist called Merkle. Let me rewrite here, Merkley. Merkle. And the importance of this iterated hash function is this is the basic structure that lies behind most of the hash functions that exist today. Even the SHA algorithm, the secure hash algorithm, which we are going to discuss in the next sessions, coming sessions, they also depend upon this iterated hash function structure only. Remember that this is very important. This is iterated hash function structure. So once you look at this particular diagram, you can see that there are number of compression functions. F represents the compression function. So we have different compression functions, and what this hash function will do is it is going to take the input message and it is going to divide the input message into L parts. You can observe here that the first part is denoted with y0, the second part is denoted with y1, and the third last part is denoted with y subscript L minus 1. Why? Because we are starting with 0, we have L parts, the last part will be subscripted with L minus 1. So the input is divided into L fixed sized blocks. This is very important. L fixed size blocks. I will tell you why we are using these fixed size blocks, but if you remember the hash concept, the hash function always accepts variable size input and it generates fixed size output. Here we are going to discuss about the variable size input, but in this iterated hash function, which is the base structure for all the hash functions that exist today, including the SHA algorithm, we are dividing the given data or the given input into L blocks of equal sizes. And if the last block, assume that this last block y L minus 1 is not having the sufficient bits to complete the fixed size block, you can use the padding also. Right. And what is the size of this each and every input block is nothing but B bits. You can see here that y0 is having B bits, y1 is having B bits, and similarly this also consists of B bits. And as I told that if the final block is not having the complete B bits, you can use the concept of padding to complete the B bits. And that is all about the inputs we have. The given input is divided into L blocks of fixed size and each block is of B bit size, that is it. And the hash algorithm involves repeated use of the compression function. So this entire block you will take it as the hash function. And internally what is this hash function is having is it is making use of the compression function f that takes two inputs. One is the input block, that is nothing but y0, y1 and so on up to yl minus 1, which is of b bit block size. And the second input that it is going to accept is of size n bits, very important. It is of n bits. And this n bits is, we will call it as the CV. Since it is the first block input, we call it as CV0, where CV stands for chaining variable. Chaining variable. See here, the first block is having an n bit input which is CV, which is the chaining variable 0, and the output after compression, applying the compression function on the b bit input and the n bit chaining variable is CV1. This CV1 is again an n bit block which is given as input to the another compression function, and upon applying the compression function on y1 which is of b bit length and CV1 which is of n bit length, it will generate the n bit chaining variable 2. Like this, the chaining variable will be generated, and finally you will get one CV, that is the chaining variable, which is L. This CVL is considered to be the required hash value. So the final value of the chaining variable is the hash value. This is CVL is considered to be the hash value. And remember that the number of bits B that is used for this Y0, Y1 and YL minus 1, and the number of bits that is used for this chaining variable CV0, CV1 and so on up to CVL minus 1, there is a relationship between this B and N. The relation is B is always greater than N. That means the number of bits for the fixed size data blocks is greater than the number of bits that is used for the chaining variable. And very important formulas you should observe here. I am writing here. Initially, the chaining variable value will be CV0, which is equal to IV. IV stands for initial value. This is nothing but initial n bit value. Maybe you can take all zeros, something like that. It is an n bit value. And what is CV1? We can easily calculate this CV1, right? CV1 is nothing but you are going to apply the compression function f on CV0 comma Y0. And if you generalize this formula, the chaining variable formula, you will get it as CVI, that is equal to f of chaining variable of the previous one, that is I minus 1 comma y, the input of yi minus 1, where the I will range from 1 to L. This is the formula. And what is the final value we get? That is nothing but CVL, which is nothing but h of m. This is the final hash value that is generated. So this is all about the iterated hash function. Iterated hash function is nothing but it consists of number of compression functions that are applied in a sequence. The given input is divided into L blocks of each consisting of B bits, and the chaining variable is taken. The function accepts two, the compression function accepts two inputs. One is the block of data which is of B bits, and the chaining variable which is of N bits. And you iterate this same bits, same functionality to the end up to you receive this CVL, the chaining variable L, which is treated as the final hash value. This is all about the iterated hash function, which is a base structure. Remember, this is very important, and this is the base structure for every hash function that you make use in the real world situation. And few important points that I would like to discuss on this iterated hash function is the motivation for this iterative structure. It has got its roots from the compression function is collision resistant. That means they assume that the compression function, what we are taking, the f, the compression function is assumed as if it is collision resistant. So if one compression function is collision resistant, then the resultant iterated hash function is also collision resistant. So then so is the resultant iterated hash function. So if one hash function is collision resistant, You take any number of hash functions, you take n number, you take some 1000 hash functions, compression functions, all that are collision resistant only. Why? Because it is nothing but a sequence of collision resistant hash functions. If one is collision resistant, n is also collision resistant. That is the important point we have. Therefore, the structure that can be used to produce a secured hash function to operate on a message of any length. So, you can observe here that the length of the message is divided into L blocks of equal size bits, that is B bits. That means you take any variable length message. The first thing you have to do is, for the input for the particular iterated hash function, you have to divide that given message or the variable length message into equal sized blocks of data. Therefore, the structure guarantees that it will produce a secured hash function to operate on a message of any length. You can take any length. But the problem with this secure hash function is, designing this secure hash function is, it reduces the designing of collision resistant compression function that operates on inputs of some fixed size. So, you can see here that the hash functions takes the messages of different length, but here the iterated hash function, they are taking the inputs as the messages blocks of some fixed size. So, this is one of the problem we have in this designing of this iterated hash structure or iterated hash function. We have discussed what this iterated hash function is, but let us now discuss what this crypt analysis can do with these hash functions, iterated hash functions. So, crypt analysis of hash functions focuses on the internal structure of f. So, as I told that the crypt analysis always concentrates on the algorithm. It always has to find the weakness of the algorithm. If you consider this particular hash function, iterated hash function, you can observe that it is made up of the compression functions which are arranged in a sequence. So, if you want to attack it using the crypt analysis technique, you should know the internal structure of this compression function. Unless you know the internal structure of this compression function, you cannot perform the crypt analysis. So, the crypt analysis of hash function focuses on the internal structure f and is based on attempts to find the efficient techniques for producing collisions for a single execution of f. So, once the attack is done, the attack must take into account the fixed value of initial value. Similarly, the attack on f depends on exploiting its internal structure. As I told that crypt analysis always needs to find the internal structure, weaknesses in the internal structure. So, compression function, the attacker has to take the compression function and he has to exploit it, exploit the internal structure of f. Similar to that of the symmetric block ciphers what we have discussed earlier, f consists of, this compression function consists of a series of rounds of processing. We can see in that AES and DES there are around 10 rounds you need to perform. In the similar way, this f also consists of a series of rounds of processing, so that the attack involves the analysis of pattern of bit changes from one round to another round. So, assume that this f is not a simple compression functions. It is something similar to that of a algorithmic function which involves number of rounds to be processed, and one output, the output of one round is given as input to another round by through some p box or s box. That is a different case, right. In the similar fashion, here also the f, the function, the compression function is assumed to consist of a series of rounds of processing, whereas the attack that you want to perform on this function f involves the analysis of pattern of bit changes that occurs from one round to another round. So, because it is very complex to understand this internal structure of f, and we are mapping a message of length at least equal to twice the block size b into a hash code of length n. What is required is, it is computationally infeasible to find the collisions. It is computationally infeasible to find collisions. And remember that there are more attacks that can happen on the hash function, and they are more complex, and they are not in our scope. They are not in our purview. So, they are out of scope, and we are not going to discuss about those attacks that can happen on the hash function, the complex attacks that can happen on the hash functions, right. So, this is all about the attacks that can happen on hash functions. We have started our discussion. Let us have a quick recap of what we have discussed in today's session. We started our discussion on the attacks, the categories of attacks that can happen. One is the brute force attack, and the second one is the cryptanalysis attack. We have seen the differences between the brute force attack and the cryptanalysis attack, where the brute force attack depends, it does not depend on the algorithm, it just depends on the bit length, whereas the cryptanalysis depends on the cryptographic algorithm, where it is interested to find the weaknesses of the cryptographic algorithms or the hash algorithms, whatever it may be. So, the main theme of the cryptanalysis is to find the weakness inside the algorithms. And then we have seen the brute force attacks. We have seen the pre-image and second pre-image attack, how it can happen, and what are the efforts that it will incur in making these attacks to happen with respect to the brute force attack. So, if m is the number of bits of the hash value, 2 power m is the effort that the attacker has to perform. And similarly, the collision resistant attacks, if you come across this one, it is the collision resistant attacks have less efforts to be performed by the attacker. That is, the efforts we can have is 2 power m by 2. I have given an example with 64 bits, and this is the summarization of the efforts that are required, the level of effort that is required if a hash code of length m is given. So, for pre-image attack it is 2 power m efforts, the second pre-image attack it is 2 power m, and collision resistant attacks it is 2 power m by 2. By this table you can observe that the collision resistant attack have less efforts to be done when compared to that of the pre-image and second pre-image attacks. Next, we have moved our discussion towards the cryptanalysis, where we have seen what this cryptanalysis is, and basically we have discussed a very important structure that is underlying between most of the hash functions in today's scenario, that is the iterated hash function. So, it is going to use the compression function as the base structure, and every compression function accepts input block of size b and the chaining variable of size n, and the final hash value you will get is the chaining variable value that we get at the last block. So, in order to have this cryptanalysis to happen, you should observe here that the attacker has to go deep into the structure of the internal structure of f. The internal structure of f, the compression function, is again a combination of number of parts or number of rounds of processing. So the attack involves analysis of what pattern changes or the bit, how the bits are being changed when it is transferring from one function or one round to another round. This is how it is going to happen. And finally, the author has concluded that these type of attacks, the cryptanalysis attacks, we have lot many to discuss, and they are computationally very high and they are very complex to discuss, and they are beyond our scope. So that's all for today's session, and this is the end of the topic on the attacks that can happen on the hash functions. Thank you one and all once again for joining this session.